Hi, I'm Tyler Holmes, a senior front-end developer for Fishtank Consulting, and today we're going to be talking about Material UI, specifically in a Next.js Headless Sitecore application, and how you can kind of utilize MUI to speed up your Headless Sitecore solutions, especially if you're doing a redesign for upgrading to Sitecore AI or any of your XM Cloud work that you have been working on. So today we're kind of going to go over quite a few different things, but mainly what is Material UI, how it works and integrates with Sitecore, kind of what the theming customization options are, what the styled data field section is, and kind of how the styled API section works, as well as how Tailwind and Material UI kind of compare to each other, and why you might want to choose Tailwind, or maybe you'll end up choosing MUI, and kind of how to pick between them depending on your needs. So what is Material UI or MUI itself? Well, MUI is actually a React component library. It's based off of the Google Material Design specification. And React itself has a great library that has just a bunch of these pre-made, ready-to-use React components. So the examples I have listed here are buttons, cards, data grids, that kind of stuff. It's a very robust and in-depth collection of React components, which gives it a lot of kind of staying power and really allows you to speed up development and kind of build a lot of stuff very quickly. It also has a very strong system level, low level styling functions. This is like your system, kind of like your spacing, your typography, your breakpoints. This is something that all your different styling options have, same as Tailwind or Bootstrap. But MUI kind of has its own kind of approach and system to that as well as also providing you with those utility properties. So here we have SX props, which is the way to design your inline styles. You have the actual styled API itself, and then a couple custom hooks like the use theme hook, which is also used to define a custom theme across the entire project. So under the hood, this is also built on top of Emotion. So this kind of provides a very strong kind of styled system principles in the background. So you can kind of trust that it's been built well and will not impede your performance too much on the front end. It integrates very well with Sitecore Headless, whether that be with SXA on a 10.3 project or whether you're utilizing it in a newer project, a fully headless project on Sitecore AI or XM Cloud. You can really utilize and benefit the speed of development from Material UI, especially if your design team is utilizing Google's Material Design specification. But that's something to kind of talk a bit more about later, but an important part as well is to focus on the design spec. But for now, we're going to talk a bit more about how MUI works, more from the code side, just so you can get a better idea here of what the structure is. So MUI has its own components. So in this example here, I have two plain button examples. The first one is just a button component that's got some inline styles. So we have some padding, background, color, kind of very standard. This is the kind of button that you'd expect to just kind of have to create manually. It's the same, inline styles is the same as using a Tailwind classes or Bootstrap classes, except in MUI, we have this pre-made button. And this pre-made button has a bunch of different features kind of crammed into it, and you can adjust the styling of this pre-made button by just defining some specific props. And there's a ton of customization that you can do to go directly into this. So in this example here, we're specifying the variant. So you can have a bunch of different built-in variants on the buttons, like MUI has a bunch. You can just kind of specify here, so we want to use the contain style variant, which is a specific set of styling. I want to specify the color to be primary. So here we're utilizing the theme hook as themes palette primary, which is a specific theme definition for our color that we want it to be using. This is something we'll go into a bit more later, so don't worry too much about that right now. And then defining the size. This is your built-in padding and font size and kind of how big you want the button to be. There's also other feature props that you can enable and disable. So in this example, we're disabling elevation, which removes that box shadow styling, because in this example, we don't want that in our styling. That's the big benefit here of MUI is you have these pre-made buttons that have a lot of stuff already pre-packed into them, and they're very easy to customize and alter instead of needing to build something from scratch every single time. Now, the styled API itself is actually a very cool and creative approach to allowing you to essentially build your own MUI components directly within your code base. So here we're building a custom badge component by utilizing the styled API and providing in the parameter of badge, which is saying that we want to use the existing badge component that MUI provides, but then provide some custom styling on top of that to make it kind of our own. So here we're changing the background color based on the owner state and accessing that theme palette to pull the direct color values from our theme. We're also changing the show zero prop value here to determine whether or not we want the visibility to show. And you can see in the export function kind of towards the bottom how we're kind of defining those values. The big takeaway here is that MUI has a lot of customizability because it's built around the emotion styling, so you can really build those customized extensions and really manipulate the components and the pre-made components as much as you want, and then build them in as kind of baked-in components to your Sitecore projects, which is really nice. Another benefit is that styles are injected at runtime or in SSR, so server-side rendering, via emotion, and then it gets compiled directly into CSS classes. This is very beneficial for speed of the site on the front end for the user being able to access and load those styles. The SX prop here that's in the example, so we're using a box component for Material UI here. This is just kind of like your standard built basic div component, and we're applying the SX value to it. This is similar to applying inline styles. However, we're using it specifically through the emotion classes, kind of preset values. Now, the benefit to this compared to inline styling is you can specify specific values that exist within your theme. So here we can see that instead of doing padding 2, we can also specify theme spacing 2, or instead of border radius, we can specify theme shape border radius to kind of access those values that we can predefine in our theming and customization, which we'll get into next. So theming and customization, it's actually very customizable, which is really good, and it will integrate very well if you want to use the SXA or Sitecore AI theming customization options from Sitecore. You can kind of just integrate those very easily by taking the predefined styles from your theming and then adding it into Sitecore as drop-down options and passing them through. But right now I just kind of want to go over the basic theming API and kind of talk a bit more about how Create Theme itself works for defining your theme for your project. Step 1, you kind of want to make this base theme item. So here we're utilizing the create theme custom styles for, API function to create this typography and spacing and breakpoint values. So you can see we can define what we want the font family to be. We can define custom typography styles, so H1 for a H1 styles, body 1 for body 1. You could do a subtitle in this section as well. And also defining spacing. This will be utilized by going theme.spacing, which we saw in the previous example, as well as defining our default breakpoints. The breakpoints that are being used here are pretty standard, but this is also customizable. You can set whatever breakpoints you feel like. And you can also take it a step further and apply a brand theme on top of your base theme. So this is kind of how you can break up the base styles and then apply a brand theme on top of that. This will be very good if you're utilizing Sitecore multi-site and you have a bunch of different sites that want to utilize the same base theme, so same styling for fonts, same spacing and breakpoints, but you have different colors and they have different color themes for each microsite or subsection. This is a great way to utilize that and can be integrated very well within Sitecore. So here we're just applying the brand theme. So we're saying, this is the primary color, secondary, and background color specific to this site. You can also make changes to components directly. So here we're making changes to MUI button, and we're just kind of defining what the default properties are and kind of what we may want to override compared to the default stylings of the MUI button. The theme provider itself is actually an awesome integration that MUI has in its React npm install. This creates a React context specifically for the theming. Now, React context obviously is something that's utilized in most projects, and if you have a super advanced project, you're probably already utilizing something like Zoostand. This is just another great way to kind of put your access to your theme items across every single file in the project. And you can do this by wrapping your theme provider specifically around the app.js file, and then providing the theme and the brand theme directly to that. It's just a super powerful way to kind of provide those theme files across the entire project by injecting them directly into the context. Next, I want to talk a bit more about token references. So this is the same example we were looking at before. So instead of P2, this is kind of utilizing the defined themes that we were talking about before. So utilizing that theme.spacing2, we can utilize theme.palette.primary.main, right? You can really take these predefined items here that we're defining within our theming API and then utilize them as broad items spread across all of our components. That way, if we ever decide to make any changes to our theme, it'll automatically be reproduced and shown up everywhere across the entire site. So now we want to kind of maybe look at some practical examples and kind of see how maybe a custom styled data field that we're utilizing the styling API will kind of look like. So here we're making a brand new component here, we're calling it DataField with two different values here, a label and then a body. So the idea here is we pull the data values in from Sitecore and then pass them down into our data field. And then we want to create a wrapper, but we don't want to use the default styled box component from MUI. We want to have some extra margin on the bottom. So to do that, we can utilize the styled API and pass in the box parameter to say we want to utilize a div, pass in the theme to say we want to utilize the theme, and then from there we just need to define what CSS options we want to change. So in this scenario, we're changing the margin bottom to have a theme spacing of 2. This creates a brand new component that we can then use anywhere on the site if we export it. So in this example, we're utilizing it in the return statement for our data field. So we're just wrapping our component with it. This applies that margin bottom, but it still comes across as a box style, so it still maintains all the box stylings that kind of come out of the box in Material UI. Then inside that we have our typography variants, which we're just applying our different variants to. So in this example, I have a subtitle 2 variant and a body 1 variant. If you want to keep this Sitecore pages editable, then all you do is just wrap your text function, your JSS text function, with the typography, and it will just apply that typography directly to the subcomponent, which is very nice. Moving on to kind of that last kind of step here, where we kind of want to compare Tailwind to Material UI, because Tailwind itself is a very strong and very powerful user interface, and this is a very different item and not the same as utilizing Tailwind. Material UI is more of a design concept rather than a quick library used to build very extremely customized options. So kind of some of the pros of Material UI compared to using something like Tailwind or Bootstrap is you've got these pre-built ready-to-use components. You kind of the pre-built ready to go, you take them out and kind of have very low dev time to get them onto the page. And this works very well for design consistency for your design team as well, who are also utilizing Material UI on their design context. So if they're building out the design and utilizing the design consistency, when you bring that over to XM Cloud to create your JSS front end, you're going to have a much faster and easier time implementing that because you can reuse the default components since both the Material UI Figma side has access to the same components as the front end development side. And then that theme and customization allows for really good theming, really good kind of specifications of changing these pre-made components, which is really good, and it kind of allows for that global change, those global changes to take place really easily, as well as the out-of-the-box accessibility that kind of just comes with MUI. You kind of have those benefits that kind of come along with it, and you can kind of just build those components directly without needing to worry as much about accessibility as you would if you were building it by hand, utilizing Tailwind or Bootstrap. There's some pretty big cons though, like opinionated styling. Styling's kind of forced to be done in Material UI's specific way, which can take a little bit of getting used to sometimes, especially for some more stubborn devs. It's also a very large library, so you're kind of importing a lot of different components when you're building Material UI. It doesn't really make sense to only use the Material UI items for subsections of the website. If you're going to use it, it makes way more sense to use it for the entire site rather than just using it for a small specific area, just because the library size is so large. You also have that complex customization. Like, this isn't the customization being complex, it is just sometimes a little bit complex to get the perfect customization that you want. If your design team is taking the Material UI designs and then modifying them significantly so they look nothing like the default Material UI designs, then your developers will have to do the same thing in the pre-made components. So there's a lot of customization going along. Your design team kind of wants to have a lot of say in what things looks like, then it might be better to focus on something a bit more open-ended like Tailwind compared to Material UI. You also have a bit of framework lock-in. Once you're kind of using Material UI, you're kind of stuck with it because you want to keep building and building. And because of that large library size, you don't want to be adding on Tailwind and Bootstrap and these other frameworks on top of it. Plus, you're also paying for all of the access to some of the Material UI Figma libraries and things kind of like that for your design teams. You kind of get stuck within that box. So you want to be very confident that you want to be using Material UI before you kind of double down and decide that this is exactly what we're doing. And then finally, we've got kind of like Tailwind here. So Tailwind itself, as everyone knows, it's the same as Bootstrap. It's just kind of like a highly customizable, lightweight CSS class that allows you to go in and create those easy custom classes that you build. We build a lot with it here, especially with our XM Cloud projects. We're building a lot of Tailwind items. It's very unopinionated. You have that direct control over your JSX, TSX, HTML items. You can kind of just go in and build and replace it. It is very good that way. But it has kind of like a little bit of a learning curve. Like Tailwind isn't as simple to just kind of pick up. You got to start to memorize these custom-made classes. It's got a lot of markup clutter. You're gonna create these pages with the designs, and you're gonna have just such long class names. Inconsistent implementation is pretty common as well. It doesn't always match everything as you're kind of going through it, and kind of requires that separate component library. A lot of the times when you're utilizing Tailwind, it's because you want to build those component libraries yourself. You don't want to kind of come in and have stuff kind of half built for you, which is the big benefit of utilizing MUI. Is a lot of the end work is kind of done for you. So if you want to do something like maybe creating a new microsite in a Sitecore multi-site setting, then using MUI for that is going to be very beneficial because it allows you to create a very quick, very fast multi-site microsite that can be utilized across multiple different pages. And you can make those very unique changes quickly just by utilizing these pre-made components compared to something like Tailwind, where if you want to make some changes to microsites to make them look slightly more unique or add a new component in, there's a lot more dev work and design time that's going to have to go into that compared to using the pre-made components from MUI. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below and we'll get back to you. Also, feel free to reach out if you want to talk to us about anything in particular.